Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Benvenuti. Welcome to this year's West Virginia Italian Heritage Festival's virtual Authors Forum. If this is your first time in attendance, this forum promotes and shares the work and publications of Italian-American authors or those that have written about Italian subject matter. I am Diana Pishner Walker, and I'm co-chair of this event along with my brother, Stephen Pishner. We have 4 authors today who will be presenting their work: Mr. Joel Strangis, Donna Meredith, Nancy Caronia, and myself, Diane Walker. The authors will be presenting their books and publications, and we will accept questions at the end of their presentations. This year, we have put together a basket of Italian goodies and books from the authors, and it's to be used as a prize giveaway. We will choose a number after the questions from the first 100 people that have registered for this event. And I would like to thank the Craft Connection in Fairmont, West Virginia, for putting this little basket together for us, wrapping it up, giving us a nice basket as a donation. That will go to some lucky winner today. Authors, before your presentation, I would like for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and about your work or your book, rather than me explaining everyone now. So you could talk a little bit about, this is your chance to talk about yourself. So we will start with Mr. Joel Strangis. Welcome, Joel. And I understand Joel will be leaving us shortly after his presentation, but he'll leave us a way to get in touch with him for any questions.
Yes. Thanks, Diana. Thanks so much. Thanks to you and Tyler and Benjamin and the committee for making this possible today. Some of you may know that I've been working on the story of Pasquale Bellota for more than 3 years now, with a lot of help from Stephen Pishner. Thank you, Stephen. And so I want to briefly, and I don't have a book to talk about today. I've written a couple books in the past, including an Italian folktale that was published by Houghton Mifflin. But I'm going to share some of my research with you today. But to get us started, I'm going to read, because that way I can stay in my time constraints. And I'll share with you a little bit of the story of Pasquale Bellota, and then get to some of the specifics of some of the research I've done, which I thought would be interesting in terms of thinking about the Italian-American immigrant experience during the Great Diaspora, mainly between about 1880 and World War I. So Pasquale Bellota was born in 1891 in a small town in Calabria, Sambiase, at the very tip of the Italian boot, and the same town that my grandfather came from. And I was first introduced to the story when I went to visit that town and kind of follow up on my roots. Pasquale arrived in Clarksburg in 1931. He was an artist in wood and eventually opened a shop making and repairing furniture and creating artistic items. But he was not a good businessman, and by 1931, he was broke. Pasquale also made the mistake of falling in love with Elsie Woolard, an astrologer who had advised him from July of 1928 until February of 1930. Elsie, however, was married, had 3 children, and according to her, did not share Pasquale's affections. Near midnight on Friday, February 20, 1931, Elsie and Pasquale were in a small cafe on Clarksburg's east side, on East Pike Street. It's now a barber shop at 228 East Pike Street. And if you look up the hill from there, that barber shop, you can see a red house up on the hill, and that's where Elsie lived. So the 2 of them were in the cafe at almost midnight, and punches started flying between the 2. As the 2 wrestled through the cafe, they broke a window. The cafe owner tried to separate them, grabbing 1 in each hand. At that moment, Elsie's husband, Herbert, arrived outside the cafe, slid a .22 rifle through the broken window, and fired a fatal shot into Pasquale. After firing the shot, Herbert went home. It's only about 700 feet from the cafe to their house, and he was arrested there about an hour after the shooting. A month later, Herbert was put on trial for first-degree murder, saying that he went to the cafe on a hunch that his wife might be in danger. Herbert admitted he shot Pasquale, but claimed that he had done so to protect his wife. The all-male jury took 20 minutes to find Herbert not guilty because of defending his wife. Given that we are here to celebrate West Virginia's Italian heritage, I'd like to share some of my research and focus on Pasquale and his brothers, who represent an important part of the Italian-American experience prior to World War I. Before I encountered Pasquale and his brothers, I had three main concepts about immigrants traveling to the U.S. First, the Atlantic Ocean was a one-way street. Italians came to the U.S., gave thanks, found work, and established a family. Why go back? That's what my grandparents and their families did. Second, I knew that almost all Italian immigrants came to the U.S. in steerage, and thus tickets for that lower level of service were cheap and easily affordable. And third, I believed that steerage was a sideline for the steamship companies. Managers said, hey, we have some extra space down below, let's crowd some immigrants in there and make some extra money. What I have learned is that all three statements were wrong. In my research, I learned that hundreds of thousands of Italian men came to the U.S., earned money, and went back to Italy with funds to improve their families' lives. They never intended to relocate to the U.S. The men who went back and forth were often referred to as birds of passage, and the wives they left behind were called white widows, as opposed to the classic widow, little Italian lady, widow wearing black that we think of so often. Pasquale Bellota and his brothers represent those who left Italy forever, as well as those who went back and forth. The complex story of the Bellota brothers, it begins like an Italian folktale. Once upon a time, in a small village in Italy, there were 5 brothers. Pasquale was the youngest of 10 children born in his family. 4 of the children died as infants. 1 sister and 5 brothers survived. Pasquale's mother came from a wealthy family, and his family lived in a 5-story home in the center of town. They were not a poor family, which is again something we often think about immigrants. The family business was building and repairing carriages and wagons. I was told by Ferdinando Vescio, a grandson of one of Pasquale's brothers, that Pasquale's father was a stern authoritarian, and the Bellota brothers may have left Italy as much to get away from their father as to improve their economic situation. The 2 oldest Bellota brothers immigrated to Argentina before 1900. That was not unique or even something special. In fact, so many Italians immigrated to Argentina that today the majority of Argentinians are of Italian descent. They have at least one ancestor born in Italy, the majority. The younger of the 2 Bellota brothers in Argentina, Giovanni, created a successful factory making wooden products such as artistic frames for paintings and mirrors. Pasquale made his first trip across the Atlantic at age 14 in about 1905. That trip was to Argentina, where he worked in his brother Giovanni's factory for 18 months, becoming a supervisor of one of the departments. So at the age 16, he was the supervisor of a department in this factory. But one day he broke an important mirror, and fearing Giovanni's wrath, he fled back to Italy and worked there for 5 more years. While Pasquale was in Argentina, 2 of his brothers were already in the United States. Brother number 3, Domenico, was the first to travel in the U.S. Domenico was the first to travel the U.S., arriving in October of 1903 and eventually finding work in Pittsburgh. About 14 months later, brother number 4, Valentino, joined Domenico in Pittsburgh. By April of 1908, Domenico was back home in San Bias, where he married Giuseppina Scalise. Valentino may have gone home for Domenico's wedding as well, for Valentino reported back to Ellis Island for his second U.S. trip on Christmas Eve of 1908, and at that point telling officials he was headed for Clarksburg, West Virginia. So he already knew there were jobs in Clarksburg. 4 months later, Domenico joined Valentino in Clarksburg. Domenico, the married man, made one more trip home and returned to Clarksburg, his 3rd and final trip to the U.S. in January 1911. 2 months later, Pasquale made his first trip to the U.S., reporting at Ellis Island that he was headed for Clarksburg to join Valentino and presumably Domenico. Therefore, it seems safe to say that for a portion of 1911, all three of the youngest Bellota brothers, Domenico, Valentino, and Pasquale, were in Clarksburg. It appears that the three brothers were back in San Bias for Valentino's wedding in 1913. After that, there is no record of the married men, Domenico and Valentino, returning to the U.S. Pasquale, however, was back in Clarksburg by the end of 1913, and this time he stayed. By 1916, he had opened his furniture shop. In 1917, he registered for the draft. He became a U.S. citizen. He voted in the 1930 election, and he became a well-known, if not always well-liked, personality in Clarksburg. Domenico made one more transatlantic trip in 1924. In that year, he took his wife and 4 children and moved to Argentina, where he went to work for Giovanni, his older brother. It sounds like a lot of Italian ping pong, but that's kind of the point, that Domenico and Valentino represent the thousands of Italian men who worked in the U.S. but had no desire to personally settle there. If you add it all up, the 3 youngest Bellota brothers crossed the Atlantic 16 times. Unlike what I believed about immigration before starting this project, the Atlantic was definitely not a one-way street. A few questions come up. What did the Bellota brothers do in Clarksburg? They did not work in the coal mines. They worked at the Phillips Sheet and Tin Plate Company, known as the Tin Mill, a steel mill east of town that employed 900 men. In order to earn sufficient capital to open his furniture shop, Pasquale continued to work at the tin mill even after his brothers had returned to Italy. How did the brothers get to the U.S.? In every case except one, they sailed across the Atlantic in third class or steerage, the cheapest way to cross the Atlantic. In steerage, separate large compartments existed for single men, single women, and families. Passengers slept in bunk beds, under or near strangers, ate in soup kitchen conditions, had too few bathrooms. There was a minimum of 1 bathroom for each 100 men and 1 bathroom for each 50 women. And since few immigrants had ever been on an ocean voyage, they endured a great deal of seasickness, both themselves and the people around them and whatever. The only Bellota trip not in steerage was Pasquale's second trip to the U.S. in 1913, when he traveled in second class. So apparently he must have had a little extra cash by that time. Contrary to my original understanding, steerage was definitely big business for the steamship lines at that time. It was not a sideline. I studied the 7 ships that carried the Bellota brothers to the U.S., plus 3 other ships that carried Dominic Ali, a Clarksburg friend of Pasquale's, the 3 times that Ali came to the U.S. So 10 ships at all. Average capacity in all 3 classes of these 10 ships was 1,348 passengers. Of that number, on average, 84% of the capacity was dedicated to passengers in steerage. In fact, 5 of the ships had no second class. They only had first class and steerage. So 84 out of 100 people that traveled in those ships were in steerage. Those numbers indicate how important steerage was to the passenger steamship lines. An interesting side note, when the Titanic, the deluxe ship, the Titanic, went down in 1912, it had more passengers in steerage than in first class and second class combined. And if you saw the movie, you know the sad part about them being locked in because they were not allowed to mix with the first and second class passengers. And so some of them went down with the ship because of that. How long did the trip take? Generally, it took 13 or 14 days to cross from Italy to New York. From Ellis Island, once they got to New York, immigrants could take a ferry to the New York train stations. For Clarksburg, you could catch the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, the B&O. The 3 B&O trains left New York City each day, headed to St. Louis, stopping at Clarksburg. The scheduled trip from New York to Clarksburg took about 16 hours. So generally people would Of course, Ellis Island is an island, so you had to get on a ferry. You would go to the train station of the whatever train you wanted. You could go to the B&O station, get on the train there, and you'd be in Clarksburg about 16 hours after that train left. How much did it cost? In most cases, about $30 to $40 for a transatlantic steerage ticket, half price for children. Those prices generally, I think, refer more to the Atlantic ports in France and England, and it was probably just a little bit more to come from Italy, which takes about 3.5 days to get from Naples to Gibraltar, just to get out of the Mediterranean. So then once you got to the US, it was another $10 or $12 for a train ticket to get to Clarksburg. Depending on your source, use a multiplier of 12 to 20 times that number to get what it would cost in 21st century dollars. So in today's value, about $500 to $700 for a transatlantic ticket. It's not a small amount, especially for a landless, impoverished head of household looking for a new life. And for a family of 2 adults and 4 children, multiply that number by 4. Children went for half price, so 2 adults and 4 children, you need 4 full price tickets. So you're looking at $2,000 to $3,000 for a family of 6 to come to the U.S. Again, not an insignificant amount. I've gained another curious and unscientific impression of steerage, and perhaps somebody listening can help me. But despite all the hardships, the crowded conditions, the poor sanitation, marginal food, and more, there does not seem, however, to be a treasury of Italian immigrant memories recalling the horrors of crossing the Atlantic in steerage. This is just my own experience reading things. I just don't find a lot of people complaining about or telling about how horrible that was. Perhaps it was so awful they block out the memory. Or perhaps the result, the gain of the experience was so great that a miserable 2 weeks at sea was inconsequential. I don't know. I'd be happy to receive any memories of the crossing that grandparents or parents shared with those listening today, with anybody who's here, if you have some. And you can contact me through email if you wish at strangenc@aol.com. So first 6 letters of my last name, Strange, S-T-R-A-N-G. I live in North Carolina, so strangenc@aol.com. And I think, Tyler, you were going to put this on Tyler's going to put it in the chat so you can pick it up. And
It's there.
There we go. There we are. No, there's no I. STRANGNC. Okay, I think Nancy put an I in there. Nancy's helped me out with some great books. There we are. strangenc@aol.com. Very good. Thank you so much, Nancy. So in summary, my research into the life and death of Pasquale has given me new insights into the journeys and the goals of the Italians that came to America. They all came to improve their lives, whether they came to stay here and make a good life here, or whether they came to and went back, took money and went back to make their lives better in Italy. I've enjoyed this opportunity. I've made a lot of friends in Clarksburg. I've enjoyed getting to know Clarksburg. I've enjoyed getting to know people in Clarksburg. And someday I'll have a book. And then maybe, Diana, when I actually have a book to sell, you can invite me back. But thank you, everyone. And I think it was Miss Bologna, who said she's going to send me some of her family experience. So I look forward to receiving that. Also, I have to go. I'm at my son's house today. We're celebrating my granddaughter's 2nd birthday. And so I have to duck out for that. Thank you, Benjamin, thank you. I have to duck out for that and can't stick around for the questions or the other speakers, but I look forward to seeing the other speakers when Tyler posts it on Facebook. So thanks to everyone, and I've enjoyed it a great deal, and I hope there's been some information that people find interesting. Thanks, Diana.
Thank you for being with us, and continue on this journey you have going. It's very fascinating.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Happy birthday to the little one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next author that will be presenting is Donna Meredith. Donna, are you with us?
I am here.
There she is.
And I'd like to thank the Italian Festival for inviting me to be part of the Authors Forum and talk about my new book, which is going to show up backwards, but it's Buried Seeds, and it just won a gold medal from the Florida Authors and Publishers Association. And it's set right there in Clarksburg and Harrison County, the majority of it anyway. I'm not Italian, so I feel really lucky to be invited to be part of this, but my story is largely set in the Italian community in Clarksburg. One of the very first scenes is the bocce tournament that is played in Shinston traditionally at the beginning of the festival in early August. And my main character is an adopted child of Italian heritage. Her name is Angie, and she becomes part of the 2017-2018 West Virginia teacher strike. So that's the time period of half of the book. And I was so proud of the West Virginia teachers when they were on the news every night. Sometimes West Virginia is not on the news for happy things. This was wonderful because they started a movement that went all the way across the country fighting for education and their students, better health care, and better wages to take care of their families. So I was so proud of them. And I just knew I had to work it into a novel sometime. And I am very pleased that I was able to do it with this book. My main character, Angie, is a science teacher at a fictional high school in Clarksburg, and she is dealing with a lot of other stress in her life. Her husband loses his job, her stepfather has Alzheimer's, and her granddaughter is born with a hearing loss. So she has all these things going on that pressure her, much the way a lot of women who work have a lot of outside pressures of the work, and they have to balance that with what's going on at home. The other half of the book takes place in the early 1900s, and it starts in Harrison County on a farm with Angie's great-great-grandmother. She has little control over her life. Her father wants her to marry someone she has no love for, so she elopes and takes off. She ends up in San Francisco, and that was important to me because women in the West got the right to vote about at least 10 years, sometimes 15 sooner than the rest of the country. So she becomes part of the women's suffrage movement in San Francisco. And it was fascinating researching those earlier times and seeing what life was like for people in San Francisco. She's there during the Great Earthquake, and there's all sorts of problems that she is trying to fix by getting the right to vote, control over her own body, control over her income, because women didn't really own any of their own income. It would belong to their fathers or their husbands. So she has a lot of reasons to get involved with women's suffrage. And you can buy my books, of course, at Amazon, since all books are there practically, but you can also get a copy through Ingram's. Any bookstore can order it from Ingram's if you ask for it. It's a major distributor. And I would also like to thank the Harrison County Clarksburg Library that has copies of my book. And the librarians there are just fabulous. And Phyllis Wilson Moore as well, who promotes the books of all West Virginia authors just tirelessly. I can't imagine how she gets all the energy to stay on top of all of us that have written books. So thanks to all those people, and thanks to all my teachers in Harrison County. I graduated from Washington Irving and then Fairmont State and WVU. And I was just so fortunate to encounter so many wonderful people that helped me to build the skills I needed to become a teacher myself, and also to write. And I will end up by telling you that I was part of a teacher walkout when I taught at Grafton High School for a while. Back in the late 1970s, I went to Charleston like the teachers in 2018 and 2019 did. So I truly related to what they were going through when they went there to fight for their students and their families. Thanks again.
Thanks, Donna. Thanks for being with us. I can't wait to read this. I want to take it out of this prize basket and read it, but I'll get my own copy. Thanks for giving us the books as well.
I'm excited to hear about your book.
Well, I'm next.
Because I have participated one time in that fishy feast.
Oh, it's wonderful. Okay, so it's my turn, I guess. Again, I'm Diana Walker. I presented for the first time at the forum in 2014 and loved it so much, agreed to co-chair this event in 2015, and I've been doing it with my brother ever since. I've written a new children's book, and today is the official launch of A Christmas Feast, A Fishy Tale. Here's the cover. I haven't been able, like probably you, Donna, and other authors, to do any book signings for quite a while. So this is a nice opportunity to be able to talk about your books and to share them, and maybe even someone will buy one. I'm originally from Clarksburg, so this time of year for me and my family is known as Italian Festival time. I live in Fairmont now with my husband. We have 3 grown children, all married. I have 3 little guys that call me Grandma. And my work consists of, I first wrote a memoir for adults, and I self-published it. And since then, I've written a children's book called Spaghetti and Meatballs, Growing Up Italian, which is a true story. Then I have Hopping to America, a series about little bunnies who travel from Italy to none other than West Virginia. One of those is Hopping to America, A Rabbit's Tale of Immigration, and it is on the shelves at the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island, which is something that just makes me proud. After that, we came out with a little activity book that encompasses all 3 of the Hopping to America series. So this book that I just had published is a little different for me. Granted, it's still a tale, T-A-L-E, but there's no bunnies this time, and it has 2 little boys who are the characters, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about those 2 characters. I attend Mass, go to church at All Saints Church, Catholic Church in Bridgeport, West Virginia. And the 2 priests that were there, Father Benny Kappa and Father Chris Turner, constantly teased me about never being in one of my books, never getting mentioned, never being a character. And I thought, okay, I'll fix you both. So in this book, the characters' names are Benny, after Father Benny, who has since passed, and Father Chris Turner. We call him Turner in the book because he's the one that turns the wheel of the ship. And I think I'll just maybe read you the dedication page. This book is dedicated to Father Chris Turner and in memory of Father Benedict Kappa. My family continues to celebrate each Christmas Eve with the Feast of the 7 Fishes. At the time of this printing, our world as we know it is in crisis. I hope this story brings to light the true meaning of hope, family, and a community coming together to help each other in a great time of need. It takes place during the holidays, and the 2 little guys always go out with their dads to catch fish. They sell it in the market, but the big time of year for them was getting ready for the Feast of the 7 Fishes for Christmas Eve. So both of the fathers fall ill, and the 2 little boys take it upon themselves to go out on this ship or their boat by themselves, and they run into a storm. And they have some problems, and I don't want to ruin the end for you, but it's, I think it's a true meaning of Christmas type of book. So I hope you'll want to read it. In the back, there are 2 recipes. The 2 of the fish we have on Christmas Eve. One is the bacala or the cod, and the other one is the calamari. I was kind of inspired to write this little book, especially after watching the Feast of the 7 Fishes movie by Mr. Tennell. And Stephen even had a little part in that movie. He played some music for one of the scenes in it. And watching that and knowing what our family did, and then the characters, it just kind of all came together, and it's ready for the holidays. It's published by Headline Books. My illustrator is Ashley Belote, and just show you a couple pages in it. These are the two little guys. There's Benny and Turner. I don't know if you can see them. And I will read to you one more page. The Feast of the Seven Fishes. The Italians celebrate the Feast of the Seven Fishes traditionally on Christmas Eve. The ancient tradition of eating fish on Christmas Eve goes all the way back to the Roman Catholic custom of not eating meat on the eve of certain holidays, including Christmas. The beginning of the Feast of the Seven Fishes started in southern Italy. This area, which is surrounded by a beautiful coastline, is also known for its seafood for generations. Many people fish there because they could not afford a lot of other food. Italian immigrants brought the tradition to America and is still celebrated today. Some of the fish that is prepared includes fried calamari, anchovies, sardines, whiting, lobster, and shrimp. Sometimes even eel is eaten. Another is bacalao, the cod. But the most important ingredient, of course, for any Italian meal is being surrounded by family and friends. So that's the Christmas Feast, A Fishy Tale. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm getting thumbs up. Our next author that's going to present is Nancy. And Nancy, I'll let you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work. And I talked her into doing this, by the way.
No, you've been great to me. Hi, everybody. I'm Nancy Caronia, and I am an associate professor of English at West Virginia University. I'm from Brooklyn, so I'm a transplanted New Yorker here in West Virginia. And the first thing I want to say is I want to thank the West Virginia Italian Heritage Festival. I've been attending since I moved here 4 years ago, and I especially want to thank Donna Pishner Walker for welcoming me into the community. She's been such a dear human being, and it's made me feel very welcome here in West Virginia. So thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit today about memoir work. I work in popular culture and film studies. I write about immigration and ethnicity, but the first thing that I did when I was earning my PhD was I co-edited this book called Personal Effects, Memoir, Teaching, and Culture in the Work of Louise DeSalvo. And Louise DeSalvo is an Italian-American author who passed away a few years ago. And it was a pleasure working on this book about her work. I learned more about her. I learned more about memoir work and the way in which we can all tell our stories. I think it's super important to understand that memoir is different than autobiography because autobiography goes in this sort of linear fashion, whereas memoir takes a piece of who we are and then examines it like we're looking at a glass, prisms in a glass. And then it allows us to think about things in a bigger way. So what I'd like to do today is I'd like to read two short excerpts. One is from Louise's book called The House of Early Sorrows. And it basically are these beginning essays that she started and stories that she started to write before she wrote her memoir. She published 11 memoirs in her lifetime, and then she wrote a lot about Virginia Woolf. But I'm going to read just a page and a half from something called Cutting the Bread. And it's the opening to her memoir from Crazy in the Kitchen. The bread. My grandmother is in the kitchen cutting the Italian bread she has made. The bread my grandmother has made is a big bread, a substantial bread, one you can use for dunking or for scraping the last bit of sauce from a bowl of pasta, or for breaking into soups or stews, or for eating with a little olive oil and a shake of salt, or with the juices of a very ripe tomato and some very green olive oil. My grandmother's bread is a good bread, not a fine bread, one that will stay fresh, cut side down on the breadboard for a few days, a thick crusted bread. A bread my grandmother makes by hand in our kitchen, much to my mother's disgust, twice a week. A bread my mother disdains because it's everything my grandmother is and everything my mother in 1950s suburban New Jersey is trying very hard not to be. Coarse, a peasant, Italian. My grandmother's bread and the pizza she makes from her bread dough are the foods that sustain me throughout my childhood. Without them, I know I'd starve because I hate absolutely everything my mother cooks. Have hated it for years. Hate it because it tastes awful, because my mother burns the food she cooks, or puts too much salt in it, or forgets to time the chicken and brings it to the table running with blood. Hate it because it's terrible food. Gristly meat, bloated bratwurst, slightly off hamburger gotten for a bargain that she tries to disguise with catsup and Worcestershire sauce. Hate it because I can taste the rage in her food, can hear it in the banging of the pots and pans in her kitchen, in the clash of metal against metal in her stirring, can feel it against my skin. The kitchen, when my mother is cooking, is not a place I want to be. And my mother's rage at me for not being a good daughter, at my grandmother for living with us, at herself for never-ending sorrow despite her loving my father, scares me, makes me want to hide in a closet or rush from the house. It is a thick, scorching rays that I cannot predict, cannot understand, but it is something I do not want to catch from her, although of course I do. And so I do not eat her food if I can help it. Do not enter the kitchen when she cooks. Do not help her cook, for she prefers when I am not near her, when no one is near her. Do not help her clean up after we eat, and I leave the table as soon as I can. My eating my grandmother's bread and not eating my mother's food is another reason my mother screams at me. Another reason my mother hates my grandmother, her stepmother, not her real mother who died when she was a baby. A mother she laments who would have taken care of her, not resented her as this woman does. And so my mother doesn't know how to be a mother to me. No cookie baking in the kitchen, no lessons in how to make sauce, no cuddles, no intimate chats at bedtime, no very much of anything. So as you can see, Louise tackles sort of difficult subject matter, even in the love that she bears for her parents. And I wrote this piece about my mother and my relationship a few years ago. My mother just passed last September. And I wanted to read you just to see the kinds of influence that someone like Louise DeSalvo has had on my writing. This is a Pushcart Prize nominated piece that appeared in Ovunque Siamo, and I'll put the URL in the chat because it's a place for Italian American writers, especially young Italian American writers. I don't mean young necessarily in age, but young writers to publish their work. So this is called Cover Me. I'm just gonna read a short excerpt. I've moved at least 20 times in as many years. At each unpacking of the recently packed, the first thing I do is to find the hand-crocheted blue and white Afghan my godmother made. Before unpacking the kitchen or setting up the television with cable or hanging all of my clothes or putting my bathroom toiletries in their designated space, I need to feel the scratchy cotton blend of yard that is this decades-old blanket. My godmother had gifted it to me for my 18th birthday, a present for my soon-to-be dorm life. I do not take lightly the feat of daring and surprise that was accomplished in its making. Aunt Kitty learned to crochet in secret and constructed it while watching baseball and bowling and golf on television. Questions about my favorite color or what I was taking to college never registered as anything more than curiosity designed to annoy. I was busy making plans. Plans that amounted to what I would do when I no longer lived at home. Attending Hofstra University was a 40-minute drive from my parents' house. I insisted on living in the dorms. I could. I got a full ride to the university. The house I grew up in was my home until I left and then returned, a stranger to my parents, my siblings, even in some regards to myself. At my birthday party, a month before I took that long drive to college and what I thought would be freedom, I opened a huge clunky box with a blue ribbon wound round the flower pattern wrapping paper. I laughed as the blanket tumbled out around me and filled my lap. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "I made it," Aunt Kitty said. "Every stitch is mine." At first I didn't believe her. I shouted, "No way!" Aunt Kitty replied, "Yes, I did, really." My mother chimed in, "You have no idea how long or how hard she has been working on this for you. Don't be ungrateful." Then she puffed furiously on her Marlboro Red Box cigarette, waiting for me to apologize for my ingratitude. But I wasn't unappreciative. I was shocked. Aunt Kitty had self-proclaimed on more than one occasion that she had not one domestic bone in her body. To counter my mother's snipe, I shouted, "I love it!" Then I sashayed around the orange and brown shag carpeted den with the Afghan wound around my body as if I were a queen. I launched into a string of, "I can't believe you made it. For me, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. But I gotta believe it. I do, I do, I do. I gotta believe." Everyone laughed at my imitation of Tug McGraw and his phrase, "You gotta believe," from the 1973 season when the New York Mets lost the World Series to the Oakland A's in 7 excruciatingly exciting and heartbreaking games. My mother's accusation was minimized for the moment. Aunt Kitty smiled and patted my mother on the knee as I came over and gave my godmother a kiss on her cheek. Aunt Kitty wasn't my blood relative, but she may as well have been. My mother and she were friends from before they spoke in complete sentences. They grew up in an Irish and Polish Brooklyn neighborhood and attended the same Catholic schools where they taunted the nuns, putting thumbtacks on chairs and nailing shut drawers. They sent one particularly fragile novice into a closet when they realized they knew the song that had been her and her sweethearts before the war. What they didn't know was she had become a nun after her boyfriend had been killed in World War II. They gulped their drinks, Aunt Kitty's and Johnny Walker Red on the rocks my mother at Manhattan I'd made, as my sisters and I listened to their reminiscences around the kitchen table as the sun went down and everything, including us, cooled off. Then they sighed at the horrifying remembrance of listening to the nuns' sobs emanating from the closet before busting out in laughter until tears streamed down their faces at all their delinquent things they've done. When my mother married my Sicilian father, Aunt Kitty was her maid of honor. My mother never had the chance to reciprocate. Aunt Kitty had a small coterie of single girlfriends who watched the New York Mets, traveled to Florida to golf, and played together on a softball team. She was, in those days, considered a tomboy, the cover for her difference and the reason why she never married. She arrived at family parties with a group of her girlfriends in tow. They brought off-color jokes and Johnny Walker Red to drink with my dad. If anyone asked why she didn't have a boyfriend or why she wasn't married, she'd remind anyone who cared to listen that she hated housework and didn't want to sit around ironing or darning socks. She raised her eyebrows above her glasses and took a swig of her drink as if to end the inquiries, and it usually worked. Her response was the official answer as to why she wasn't married. But that was not the truth. This 6-inch by 6-inch blue and white squared 6-foot-long rectangle is more than an anachronistic moment. Each stitch embodies her devotion to me, and most importantly, to my mother. I don't want to put a label on something my aunt was never allowed to name in my parents' home. She's gone, all of her friends are gone, and now my mother is gone. And what I would say about my aunt's truth is that my mother never knew. She never realized how close Aunt Kitty felt to her or why she stuck around even after my mother married my father when it was clear she could not share certain parts of her life with my mom. I often wonder how she felt getting drunk and laughing with my dad. Those two were more alike than my mother and my godmother. Perhaps my mother found a man who reminded her of her best friend. My aunt, in turn, relied not on my mother when she had some financial difficulties, but my father. He figured some things out for her my mother never knew until my aunt's death. The two of them, my Sicilian-American dad and my Polish-American aunt, bonded over the love they had for my mother, and my mother remained clueless about how much they both felt for her, how much they both felt the same thing for her. And even writing these words causes me to hesitate. What right do I have to name a love that was never named? What do I know of it? And all I can say is, I have the Afghan to prove it. Thanks, everybody.
Nancy, that was wonderful. Wonderful. I think all the viewers here will agree with me. That is a book.
I hope so someday.
Stephen is going to take care of, we've got a lot of comments and questions coming up on the side, and he'll take care of getting those to the authors, and maybe we can get some questions answered. So we need to unmute Stephen.
I'm going to, while I'm doing this.
There was a question about, Diana, about your illustrations. You might want to review that first.
Okay. I've had the same illustrator for all of my children's books. Her name is Ashley Belote, and she now lives in, she was from Preston County. She now lives in South Carolina, and her mom is my publisher, Headline Books. So I found the illustrator before the publisher.
I see a lot of comments. And then the other thing I was going to say that Joel didn't get to say in his, if anybody has any questions, go ahead and post them in the chats down, and we'll deal with them. But one of the things that Joel didn't get to say in his research is that he did come to Clarksburg, and he had contacted the Diocese of Wheeling, Charleston, the Catholic Diocese. He had contacted the Historical Society. Then he contacted the Italian Festival Office, and then they contacted me. And then he and I met a few times. But what the mystery of his content is the fact that after the guy who was shot died, the telegram, the Exponent Telegram, carried stories about this. Jonathan Weaver is on here from the Exponent Telegram. Jonathan, you may want to go back and look at those stories, because every night in the newspaper, it was like February of 1930 something, 31, 32, 33, somewhere in there, there was a huge spread in newspaper about this murder. And the big thing is that it even talks about how many cars came to the funeral. It was like 75 cars, 300 and some people, and it was in Holy Cross Cemetery, which is right here in Clarksburg. And the problem is that the family in Italy, Dr. Vecchio, this is his great uncle, this Pasquale, they want the body exhumed, and they have permission to do that, to take the body back to Italy and put it with the rest of the family in Calabria. But the problem is they can't find where the body is buried in the cemetery. There are records that were found that say he's buried there. The newspapers say he's buried there. But to locate the grave, we cannot find the grave at all. They've even gone over there to try to poke in the ground to see what might be possible. But there's all kinds of talk about there maybe 1,000 unmarked graves in the cemetery. So that's where Joel, that's his quest to find this body. And in the meantime, while he's been here, I keep telling him, this is a book, if not a movie, in some way. And so that's
I think it'll end up a book. Definitely.
Probably so. Definitely. Okay, now Jonathan, I think you chimed in. Let's see. Jonathan Weaver from the Exponent Telegram says to ask 3 questions via Zoom. What's today's? Okay. May I ask the 3 authors still here if they have ever discussed their book via Zoom before, what today's experience was like before, and then what's today's experience, what this experience is like. So each of the authors who are here, go ahead and chime in if you wish. Maybe Tyler, you can unmute them, or Benjamin.
Since I'm already unmuted, I've done several Zoom presentations with Headline Books. My publisher sets it up, and I take each children's book and read each different children's book at each session. And it seemed we got a little bit of, there's several people that watch it. I watched one, I looked up the shares on one, or the views on one. I think it was like over 1,500 or 1,600 views. And I definitely got a royalty check after that one. So it was good. It's what we've got, it's what we've got to use right now.
Donna?
I've used Zoom for several book discussions, and with several other authors, we've had discussions called West Virginia by the Book, and discussed my book and also Meredith Sue Willis's, and in the future we hope to do some other authors as well. There's really nothing else you can do right now because you can't do in-person events. What with the virus, it just wouldn't be safe. And that's how I've usually promoted my books. This one, because it dealt with women's suffrage, I had planned to go out and talk about that because it was the 100th anniversary of it being passed, ratified by Tennessee just a couple weeks ago, August 18th, I believe, was the date. And so those plans for promotion didn't pan out, but still you do what you can, and happy to have Zoom. Otherwise we'd have nothing.
Great.
Yeah. I would say that because I'm a professor and I'm teaching remotely, I'm on Zoom almost 8 hours a day at this point. What I'm loving about today is that I don't always get to share my own work. And so for me, this is really precious, and I'm so grateful to be here. But yeah, Zoom is the future, or Zoom is the present, at least.
Nancy, you talked about your relative or your grandmother cutting the bread.
That's Louise DeSalvo, yes.
Well, I mean, yeah, in the other piece, that's right. Yeah, Louise DeSalvo piece. Did they put a picture of her cutting the bread anywhere in the book?
No, because this book is really about the immigration of her grandparents, and she does have a whole chapter about the way the grandmother cuts the bread, and how the grandmother, and there's a tradition of this where she would hold the bread to her chest and cut it this way so that it's so visceral. That part of the chapter in Crazy in the Kitchen, that part of the memoir in Crazy in the Kitchen, is you're on pins and needles, and that's what Louise wants you to feel. She sets up that sort of, this is the way it gets cut, this is the tradition, this is the mythology of Southern Italian, the way that we eat. And it's everything that her mother is so freaked out by because she just wants to be American. And this woman, this grandmother who can't even speak English, refuses to do any of that. So it's a I would recommend, if you want a great book, a memoir by Louise DeSalvo, Crazy in the Kitchen is wonderful. Yeah. Thanks for asking, Stephen.
Yeah. The cutting of the bread, when you sit there and watch, you always think like there's going to be some kind of bloodshed or something, because but they do it with such ease. It's like, it's effortless. To us, it's like, what's going on here?
But it really
Yeah, go ahead.
It really is that sort of transubstantiation of women, sort of, if you think of the Catholic Church, but here's the women with the body and the blood, right? Or the possible blood.
Yeah, go ahead, Donna.
Even before you go on with any more questions, I want to just back up a little bit, and if we could unmute Julia Todd. Julia Todd's with us from the Clarksburg-Harrison County Public Library, and she has joined us today, and I'd like for her to be recognized and say a few words. She has been a godsend throughout most of these, up until this one. We've been in that library, and she's either making coffee or helped me put cookies out and doing publicity and you name it. And she does it for our authors forum each year. I would like to thank her publicly and see if we can get her to say something.
Thank you, Diana. It's been a true blessing to be here and watch this again. As many of you know, I just did get out of Ruby from surgery, but to be here is just absolutely wonderful. The Clarksburg Library prides itself on showcasing and promoting all we can do for West Virginia authors. That is a #1 goal we have, is to promote that. I was just sitting here a few minutes ago telling my sister that this time last year we had about 160 people in the library. And hopefully, Diana, I can say this without you and I tearing up, but we had the most wonderful Tommy DiApollo at that event.
Tommy DiApollo.
Like I say, when it comes to West Virginia authors, we always go above and beyond what we can do. Diana, Stefan, wonderful job this year. Great. And next year, the COVID's going to be over and we're going to get together again, have a big party.
Bring the cookies back out, right?
That's right.
All good with that.
And the Tommy DiPaola thing was a shot in the dark to try. And we got, if you weren't here last time, we got Tommy DiPaola, wonderful children's author, very, very Italian flavored books and other things that he's written as well. But he wasn't traveling at all, and we have barely any budget to do these things. So we had everything against us, and we tried, and he said yes And we probably got one of the last, if not the last, face-to-face interviews, because then he died shortly afterwards.
Yeah, it was a Skype visit.
Yeah, we did a Skype visit into this this forum, so that was a big thing. And a lot of the teachers who were there that used a lot of children's books for the younger ones, they came in and they were glad that they actually got to see this man who wrote all these books like Strega Nona and some of those other things, the Magic Pasta Anthony and the Magic Pasta Pot and some of those other ones that are good for kids.
It was a fantastic forum, as they always have been. I mean, Diana started the forum, we had her downstairs in a little small area, and I said, you know, we kept pushing things back and pushing things back. Last author forum that she did, we covered the entire second floor. So at the rate we're going, we're either going to have to go to a bigger building or add another floor to the library. I don't know. But she takes, you know, her events, this event takes up the entire second floor. So it is a wonderful event each year. And her and her brother do an absolute elegant job for these authors. It's great.
Thank you, Julia. Thanks for being with us today. Stephen, I think you have a few more questions.
Let me go down and check here. In the chat we have, let's see. Let's see. Jonathan says, just to follow up on something you said, Diana, and also to Nancy. So do you think there will be many more Zoom book discussions in the future, regardless of COVID-19, just because of the possibility of getting out to more people?
I think so. As a matter of fact, not necessarily just the Zoom, but I think there'll be a lot more able to view by computer. I was asked to speak for a group next week, and what we came up with was they were going to do a Facebook Live session, and I'm going to speak to them during Facebook Live. I said, just put me up on a podium, put the laptop up on a podium. I'll speak for my 15, 20 minutes. I sent them ahead of time book order forms for the ladies, and then I'll pick up the orders and come back and return the books. And I'm still out of a crowd, and yet saving so much time, you know, so much time of your day. It's 15 minutes rather than getting there, staying for the meeting, staying for the lunch, you know what I mean? And I think we'll be doing a lot more of these.
The other thing is, I would say my vote would be, I'll put this in front of Diana and Julia as well. I think that next year's forum ought to be both. Ought to be this live with guests by way of Zoom, so that we have, you know, double the amount of exposure for what we're going to be talking about with authors. But that's in the making. I mean, when we come out of this COVID-19 style of doing everything, perhaps we'll have more insight on how to do things a little bit more inclusively, or just widening the circle. But I could see this forum being live and Zoom based at the same time.
Right,
Julia,
right. Combine them.
What about Julia? What do you think, Julia? Is Julia there?
We need to unmute Julia.
Unmute you. Okay.
I think that's an absolutely wonderful job. I think that's a great idea. I really do see that happening, especially the success we had last year and the success here. I think it's wonderful.
Are there any more questions? I don't see anything else. Let me check the bottom here. Hold on. I'm working off of a cell phone.
Bill has a question.
Okay, Bill's question. Is it the practice of the authors, is that to work on more than one project at a time, or only one? I don't think we narrowed it down to just one project. I think if they have a variety of works, they can give a taste test of each one or talk a little bit about them, right, Diana?
Right, with the focus on the most recent.
Yeah.
Bill, we're glad you're on here. If Tyler and Benjamin can unmute and maybe give us a few remarks from the festival office.
They're at the headquarters.
Can everyone hear me?
Okay, there's Benjamin.
Tyler,
Tell us that
Everybody
shirt
was there.
first.
Tyler's across the room from me, so it's echoing. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Benjamin DeFazio, who's also a singer, entertainer for the
Here we go.
And there you go. Benjamin, why don't I show him the shirt?
Benjamin, show us the shirt first.
I'm matching Diana today.
Yay.
Benjamin did these are limited edition COVID-19 West Virginia Italian Heritage Festival shirts. Benjamin designed them all.
Good job, Benjamin.
We have three different ones.
I'm gonna
And we
see
still have
share the file with you now here.
Yeah, we still have a few left in the festival office. They're $15, is that right? Yeah. We have a few left, and it's limited edition. That one's, I'm eating my pasta at home this year. That's that one. Yeah. And then do you have the other two that you can hold up and show?
Yes.
Okay.
Sending Courtney over to get them.
Okay. Courtney, our assistant. She helps with Jody Messina sometimes.
While she's going over there, I'll touch base on how the virtual festival is working, and Tyler and Steven can pop in and tell you all a little more about this. We've been getting a lot of questions, a lot of interest for the virtual event this year. It is going to be very different, but it is going to be very exciting. And Nancy, you had mentioned you've been coming to the festival for about 4 or 5 years. So I think more than anyone, people have asked, like, is this going to be cool if I've never been? Is this going to be cool if I've been coming since the beginning? And I think it's going to be really, really just an awesome immersive experience for anybody. What are you saying?
I have a question. Is Rose Tatuato going to play? They're my friends. That's why I'm
Yeah,
here.
they're awesome. Yeah, there is a clip there. They will not be live with us this year. So the live performers we do have are some of the locals we have. I'm included in that. Steven's included in that. But we do have a small clip of them in the past.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so you will see that. And what's going to be really cool, I was thinking when you were just saying you've been coming for about 4 or 5 years, you're going to get to see the festival from the very, very early years, which I hadn't seen either. So that was really, really cool to see. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy that. All right, I have some shirts here. We have a blue one. It says, "I survived this."
Nancy, you should.
That reminded me of the cutting of the bread you were talking about, Nancy.
If you need that one.
And then we also have, and I believe we just have 2 mediums left in this one. This is 2 of our Tarantella dancers with their masks on, 6 feet apart.
Hold up. It says 6 feet in the middle there.
Okay.
I think that the blue one, I survived this in quarantine, would go big in Brooklyn, Nancy.
It's true.
So the virtual festival will begin Friday, September 4th at 8 p.m. And it will run until about 10 p.m. on Friday night. On Saturday, it'll start at 5 and it'll run till about 10 p.m. And on Sunday, it'll begin at 2 and run until 6. It will be a live Facebook experience. So you can tune in live or you can watch it after. It'll be there for your viewing after that. And it'll also be broadcast on the website, WVIHF.com. If you are local in West Virginia and you have CityNet, it will be on CityNet channel 100 and will also be on WVMetroNews.com.
Facebook, I think we have a Facebook link, and then we'll try to all of us copy it onto our Facebook link so you can join us. We're going to be broadcasting live out of the newly restored, renovated Robinson Grand Theater in Clarksburg. If you want to know more about that, you can go onto the internet, go to Robinson Grand, just Google that, and it'll take you inside the theater and show you what it's like. But we hope to have had some other things at the Robinson Grand as well this year, but that's all on hold for next time. So we did the shirts. Does Tyler want to say anything on behalf of the festival board, or is he on a mission?
He's there. Let me mute so he can go over to that. And then we'll come back to me, Diane, if you're ready for the
Drawing.
drawing. Yes.
Sure.
So I'll flip over to Tyler real quick.
By the way, is Donna the furthest away from us today on this conference call? I mean, on this Zoom meeting.
We have
Donna,
Florida and we have Tennessee.
Tennessee. Well, Donna's what? You're
I'm in
Florida. Florida. So who's the furthest away? I don't know. Donna drove the furthest, so to speak.
There isn't a prize for that, Donna.
Darn.
You could just have the title for today.
He was being misleading, wasn't he?
Oh.
Well, hello, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you to all the authors for participating in this year's Authors Forum. We greatly appreciate it. It's always wonderful to have this as one of our events at our festival. I'm glad that we could still do it in this new virtual way for this year. And I'm excited I can be part of it this year. And I look forward to having a bigger and better one, even in person next year. And I like what Stephen brought up, and somehow I think we can incorporate having the in-person, the in-person part of it, but also still doing, getting people connected through Zoom or something for those who can't be there with us. So I definitely think it helps expand our audience base. So hopefully we'll do that in the future. And again, just to reiterate what Benjamin said, please join us next weekend for the virtual festival. We're really excited for this. It's something totally different. And I really think it's going to be a new way for us to connect with our festival goers in a way that we've not been able to really do ever. And I think it's just going to be something special and keep the festival in people's minds and let them know that we haven't gone anywhere and that we'll be back for another big celebration next year once we get through all of this COVID craziness. So that's it. All right. Thank you. Turn it back over to you guys.
Next week in front of the festival office, we're still doing Saturday, Sunday. If you're in Clarksburg or nearby, free tea, correct?
Yes. As far as we know, or it'll be Saturday, and most likely, yes, Sunday as well.
Okay. And then
we'll post more about that on the Facebook.
And then also, if you go to WVIHF.com, the virtual schedule's on there of when to tune in and where to tune in to watch the rest of the festival. Also, and the festival mass will be on the Facebook page. We'll have that linked for the festival Facebook one, and also All Saints, Bridgeport, West Virginia. It'll be linked there for the festival mass. Okay, let's go back to Diana.
Okay, and I'm going to turn it over to Benjamin with just hang out with me because we have, oh, you have them in a basket.
I have them.
Look at you. Am I just going to tell you a number?
I'll just reach in and draw. Is that?
That's perfect.
Let Courtney pick it. Is Courtney?
These are everyone that has registered for this event today. Whoever's name he picks out, I will deliver this basket to.
We had 39 registrants. Some popped in. They had to pop out. I'm getting a little echo.
Okay,
Wade Fargo.
There. Sorry, I was late.
I
I had a funeral at 10, so I
We
got
thought you-
it back late.
We thought you dressed up for us.
Always.
This is usually Winter's job.
I was trying to get it in the car while I was driving back from Shinston, and I couldn't get it on my phone. So by the time I got home, I'm like, well, I'm going to get the tail end. But I got your books. Love it, Miss Diana. Love it.
Thanks for getting them.
Yes, absolutely. My family will be so happy.
Oh, good.
And thank you to all the authors. I'm on the board for the festival. I've been with them since it started in '79. And I thank you for your hard work and participating in this type of activity, which allows people to understand that the festival goes much deeper than just 3 days like a street fair. And it's important for people to understand some of the other topics we cover and other activities we have so that they can see how deep we try to keep the tradition and the tracks of everything. So I thank all of you authors, and I especially thank the folks who tuned in. So thank you.
Thanks, Wade.
All right, we have a winner.
We have a winner.
Jenny Santilli.
I knew
Jenny
that was going to
Santilli.
be you today, Jenny. I just had a feeling.
Woohoo! Yay, Jenny.
Jenny, I will drop it off at your house my next trip to Clarksburg. Well, I think we're ready to close up. Everyone go ahead and eat something Italian now that you've had all this Italian that in your bloodstream running through. And I would like to thank everyone for tuning in, the authors for taking the time to do this, the board for how hard you worked during all this. Benjamin, I'm sorry that I drove you nuts over this for the past couple of weeks, but we did it. So thank you once again, and ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao. Buongiorno, ciao.
Ciao. Ci vediamo.